Hey guys, I wanted to speak to you today about vessels. God has been speaking to me about vessels, and it is through people who carry an anointing of God, an anointing of power, and the people who, when I look at, I see their videos on YouTube, and they carry such power of God in their life to deliver other people, to set captives free, to heal the sick. And I was listening to one of these ministers, her name is Catherine Creek, and she was talking about vessels and how God uses vessels.
Wake up.
And we should be consecrated vessels that God can trust. In 2 Corinthians, we have this treasure. We've been given this treasure in earthen vessels. These are clay jars, so that the extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. In the olden times, they would make these earthen vessels. They would use to hold different contents. Even today, we have different kind of vessels. We've got vases, porcelain, jars, and even your glass, which is made, from sand. So these were all made from sand. In Job, it speaks of something. It says, how much more to those who live in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, who are crushed like a moth. So you see the frailty. They're very fragile. They handle with care. And we alike, we're made from the dirt. We're made from the soil. Can you imagine? So we're like these earthen vessels, prepared. There's something when you go to 2 Timothy, Paul was speaking on a subject. He said, however, God's solid foundation remains standing, bearing this seal: the Lord knows those who are His, and everyone who confesses the name of the Lord must turn away from evil. Now, in a wealthy home, there are not only gold and silver vessels, but also ones made of wood and of clay. And some are for honorable use, but others for ignorable use. So, if someone cleanses himself of such behavior, he will be a vessel of honorable use, set apart, useful for the master, prepared for every good work. So God calls us to be set apart, so He can use us for a special purpose. The better vessels are reserved for special purpose. So when we prove ourselves, God calls us. He says, be holy, for I am holy. And holy means to be set apart. When we set ourselves apart, set apart from the world, we're not called to conform to the standards of this world. But when we reserve ourselves for God to use us, there's a cost for the anointing of God. Then God can really use us in a special way. And there's nothing more admirable than that, to be used by God. Because remember, we were created to bring God glory. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, he says, Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run like that you may win. Every man who strives in the games exercises self-control in all things. Now they do it to receive a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible one. I therefore run like that. It's not uncertainly. I fight like that, not as beating the air. He says how he beats his own body and subjects his own body. There's a mastery involved when you participate in a sport, in athletics. If you imagine a footballer, there's a kind of lifestyle they have to maintain, they have to live up to. If you're a footballer, you want to play in the Premier League. You don't want to play in the Championship. But there's a level. If you're a basketball player, you want to play in the NBA. But there's a level you must attain of mastery, where you subject your body to. There's a level of training involved for you to qualify. It says those who run a race all run, but there's only one winner. So there's a race. There's a race. And when we qualify ourselves and we prove ourselves trusting to God can use us. James in his book said, "Blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been approved, he will receive the crown of life which is promised to those who love him." So there's a season, there's a time we are tried, we are tested to prove if we will stand. If we overcome, if we endure the temptation, we receive the reward, the crown of life. That means you begin to reign in life. And how they make earthen vessels, even porcelain, they put it in a hot furnace before it's usable. I don't know if you've ever done that, the painting, the plate, pottery, painting. And before it's put in the oven, it's not usable. It's like powdery. It's not, before it's put at these extreme heats and prepared, that's when it comes out shiny, and now it's usable. So he says that the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, though it be tried with fire, may be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. So even gold, before it's just a blob, but it's put in the fire and it separates the precious, pure gold. The quality of the gold, the carat, the more it's tested in the fire, so again and again, it's becoming purer and purer. When he talks about how we've been given this precious spiritual treasure in earthen vessels, the excellent power of God, it continues to say how we are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed. We're fragile. We're tested, but we stand the test. We prove ourselves worthy, usable. There's a story I love when you look at the book of Daniel. It talks about when Babylon had conquered and took over Israel. It brought some vessels from the temple of God. And the king brought them and placed them in the temple of his gods. But he also took some of the nobles, children of Israel, even of the royal family and of the nobles, youths of whom there was no blemish, but well-favored, skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability to stand in the king's palace, that he should teach them the learning and the language of the Chaldeans. The king appointed for them a daily portion of the king's royal food and of the wine which he drank, and that they should be nourished 3 years, that at its end they should stand before the king. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And you see these 4 boys, even though they were taken to Babylon, a different system, but they were dedicated to God. They refused to eat the food from the king's table, from the king of Babylon's table. They said, give us plain food and water to drink, and we'll prove healthier than the rest. And at the end of their trial, they proved to be 10 times wiser than the rest of the people who ate from the king's table. It says, when the king spoke with them, he did not find among the entire group anyone like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom, insight, the king asked them about. He found them to be 10 times better than any of the magicians, astrologers, that way in his entire empire. So these 4 boys were like the vessels from the temple, which were supposed to be reserved for God, for God's use. And there's a story where the next king took vessels from that had been taken from Jerusalem, and he wanted to use them for his party, and he said, bring the vessels so that we can drink from and party. That's when they saw the writing on the wall and the judgment of God, because those vessels were dedicated for the Lord's use, for God's use. So you see, even with these 4 boys, how God protected them in a different nation, in a Babylonian system. Even when they were thrown into the fire, they did not burn. And he said, one like the Son of Man stood with them in the fire, and they were not burnt up. No smell like smoke. You know how Daniel was thrown in the lion's den, but he was not eaten up. God preserved them, God protected them through all their trials, even in the fire heated up 7 times. And they would acknowledge that the Spirit of God was in Daniel. It says these 4 boys had an excellent spirit, and God used them mightily. But there's a particular lifestyle they maintained, a walk with God. They refused to bow down to other gods. Daniel, there's a discipline of life. Daniel continued to pray to God even when the pastor edited that no one is supposed to pray. But he refused to be stopped from praying to God, as he would 3 times a day. It says he would kneel down and pray facing Jerusalem. It says the other administrators and satraps of the king had become jealous of him because he was highly favored by the king, who had set him over his whole realm. So they tried to seek for any charge they can lay on him, but they couldn't find any charge or fault with him because he was faithful. Neither was there any error or fault found in him. That's when they tried to trap him, because they knew he always prayed to God. And they got the king to quickly pass a law that no one was supposed to pray except to the king for 30 days. But Daniel couldn't live without prayer. He could not live without praying to God. And he refused to follow that. That's when they threw him to the lion's den. But God preserved him. And these men proved beyond whatever, they proved faithful to God all the time. When they refused to bow to the golden statue that had been set up, and they were threatened to be thrown into the furnace, they said, our God will save us. And even if he doesn't, we will worship him. And they refused to bow. They were so faithful and they were ready to die for their faith. And God stood up for them, and God preserved them and proved to the king that he is the living God. I hope you're blessed, guys. Thank you.